Welcome on in, everyone, to this week's edition of OA News Overtime. I'm Sara Palczewski, and as always, I'm here with the always wonderful Jordan Hill and Justin Lee. So, guys, what have you been up to recently?
This has been a pretty fun week. Finally, basketball had wound down last week. We kind of had a chance to catch our breaths, but also get ready for spring season. The early part of the spring is always an interesting one because you got basketball winding down. You're trying to keep up with baseball, softball. So yeah, this was a nice week to kind of get settled back in and kind of begin really focusing on those spring sports.
As I throw my phone on the ground, moving from the hard court to the diamond, basically moving, baseball and softball coming up. So, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but we have basketball first, right, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were all kind of stunned by yesterday's news, seeing that Auburn guard Justin Powell was decided to enter the transfer portal and leave Auburn just after one season. So did y'all kind of expect to see him as the player to enter the transfer portal this year from Auburn?
I'll say I was very surprised by it. It really had never crossed my mind that he may leave. He had played so well to begin the year in non-conference play. Auburn needed somebody to step up with Sharif Cooper not available while the NCAA tried to figure out his eligibility. And Justin Powell was that guy who stepped up early on and played really well. I think he had 26 points against South Alabama. And that was a big, record tying mark for a freshman in his home debut at Auburn. So, there was early signs that he could be a really productive player. Obviously, you didn't expect him to be able to kind of continue that when the competition sort of stepped up and you got an SEC play. And you saw that in the few SEC games he played. Then he gets hurt on January 2nd, and, we pretty much don't hear from him again. He has that concussion against Texas A&M, and he's held out. We don't even see him with the team until the Florida game, and that was one of the last games of the year. So, I was surprised to see that he's not coming back. I think, I will say, I think some people think that this is like a huge loss, and I don't think it's quite that big of a loss. I think it is an issue as far as depth. I think he could have gave you some valuable minutes, but, I don't think that this is, any plans to make a deep playoff run, a deep tournament run next year, they're off the table because Justin Powell's not coming back. I don't get the sense that's the case, especially with the talent we expect Auburn to have coming back. That could be a bit of an issue or a different story if they have multiple guys leave for the draft, and maybe you do say, well, that's a bigger loss than we thought. But yeah, I was surprised, but I will say too, Justin Powell went to 3 different high schools when he was in high school. He went 2 years to one high school in Kentucky, went a year at a high school in Florida, then went to a different high school in Kentucky his senior year. So who knows, maybe that's just sort of been his vibe, and maybe he thought he could find a better opportunity elsewhere. Maybe he winds up at Kentucky. We'll see if he goes closer to home. And so, yeah, definitely caught me by surprise, but I don't think it's quite the end-all, be-all that I think some of the Auburn fans sort of think it is.
It was definitely a surprise. I think maybe it's a little bit of a reminder, not to be too dramatic, but just like that, we don't know these kids, and we don't know what their goals are, especially this year. Jordan, you and I never met Justin Powell once. Nope. We talked to him on Zoom for 2 minutes once or something. You know what I mean? 1 or 2 times. That's it. We didn't know his goals. We didn't know where he wanted to be with his college career. And we can't just assume that he's, some all shucks person who maybe he wants to be a starter next year. And really at Auburn, he wasn't going to be a starter next year. In my mind, I did not see that happening. It couldn't happen because it did. Here, we can go ahead and talk about this now. Looking at this next year's starting lineup, kind of talking about what Jordan was saying with, what this loss means. My early starting five for next year is either Sharif or his replacement. We can get into that in a little bit, but and then at the two, then you go JT Thor at the 3, and then Jalen Williams down low. Then you have Jabari Smith, right? So. That there really was, and then Alan Flanagan, of course, would be the 2. You're returning leading scorer possibly unless Sharif comes back. So that's your starting 5 in my mind. I did not see a spot. I saw Justin Powell coming off the bench further in his career. So if he wants a starting spot, it makes sense for him to leave. And and obviously he's not saying a lot. Bruce isn't saying a lot. So we don't know exactly what I was going into this decision, but that's that's part of it. And talking about Sharif, we mentioned it, either he comes back or, you have Scooter Henderson committed to come down the line. So you've got to, you either bring in Sharif or you bring in a grad transfer 1-year deal mercenary ball handler to just replace Sharif. I think that's where Auburn is right now. I think that's next year's starting 5. So for Justin, I mean, I didn't see a starting spot for him next year. So if that's his goal, then it makes sense for him to take a look somewhere else. And some of these people, some of these schools, Kentucky and Louisville, who were close for him, they overlooked him last year, but now their season did not go the way they thought it was going to go. And all of a sudden, they may be taking a second look at him. So it'll be really telling where he ends up. Then we'll understand a little bit more of the motives and why he left. But right now, nobody's talking, so we don't know.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised to see Justin Powell announce that, or just see reports that he was leaving the Auburn team. And I think his loss actually might be a little bit more stinging to Auburn, only because he seemed to be the only one who could consistently shoot a 3-point shot this year for Auburn. And that's something nice that Auburn might need down the line. You never know. They don't have a Bryce Brown that's going to be there reliable to shoot that 3. I never really saw another player other than Justin Powell this season to reliably shoot a 3, except for Jamal. But Justin Powell was shooting a super high percentage. I think I heard he was shooting about 44% from 3-point range, which that's pretty high. And I mean, he didn't play the whole season, so it would have been interesting to see him play with Sharif and if that number continued. But that's something that you can replace at Auburn. I don't think finding a 3-point shooter who's consistent is going to be hard to replace. But speaking of that, y'all kind of mentioned
Dylan Cardwell, who's shooting 100% from 3-point range.
I was going to say, this is Dylan Cardwell eraser, and I will not stand for this.
Put some respect on Dylan Cardwell, 100%.
Both of y'all have mentioned maybe Justin Powell going somewhere closer to home or somewhere where he could be a starter. So where not ideally, but where do you think he goes from Auburn? Do you think he goes to another big Power 5 school, stays in the SEC or a Power 5 conference team? Or does he go somewhere kind of smaller? What are y'all's thoughts on that?
My immediate reaction is Kentucky. And it's funny. I can't remember who it was on the beat. We were talking early in the season when Kentucky was really struggling. And they were like, you know what Kentucky could use right now? A Justin Powell. And I mean, that's what the way their roster was made up. They didn't have that guy, that ball handler that could make those kind of plays. So that's my initial reaction, is that he goes to Kentucky. I don't know how quickly he'll be, declared eligible. And obviously we're still waiting. The NCAA may say that this is a year where, everybody gets a free transfer and he can play right away. But right off the top, I say Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, you would think it'll be somewhere closer to home, but, we'll see. Maybe if he goes to a smaller school, if he has lingering health effects, that might be more manageable than the pressure of the SEC. If he chooses to go that, like I said, we'll learn more when he goes, where he ends up, what his intentions were and what he was looking for. What is he going to find that he didn't have at Auburn, right? I think it's a starting spot, but that's just me speculating. So yeah, I think we'll learn, like we said, everybody's being quiet about it, but and everyone will stay quiet about it, but we'll see where he ends up, and that'll be telling. But yeah, I mean, it could be Kentucky, it could be Louisville. Neither of them had very good seasons. They, it's hard for them to be too big for him now. But we'll see.
Absolutely. And this might have been kind of a sour note to the end of Auburn season, but Auburn did end the season on a high note. They might just be the only SEC team to end this year with a win. Unless somebody wins the national title this year, then they would not be the only SEC team to end with a win, but they got the win over Mississippi State to close out the season. And I think everybody kind of saw some good things going on with Jamal being a manageable point guard, not turning the ball over, and the team just kind of doing some good stuff. So what did y'all kind of see out of that game that gives hope and promise for Auburn fans next year, since this year was so disappointing?
I think Jamal might have been a little bit better of a point guard than coaching staff gave him credit for early in the season, because that was my first time seeing him in person. But and kudos to him for the way he adjusted when they went to Justin first as their ball handler with Sharif out. But I mean, Jamal down the stretch of the season proved what he can do. So and his future obviously would be a shooter first, and then relieve Sharif / Sharif's replacement, a Sharif-like player that they bring in. But yeah, no, I think you still, I mean, maybe it wasn't the season you wanted, but you have to like who could come back. We'll still see. Bruce says several guys will go into the NBA draft process. As we've talked about, it is more friendly than ever for a player. It has never been easier to go get your evaluation and still come back to college. So, and when those announcements come, we'll explain it the best we can, but it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's leaving. But yeah, so I mean, I imagine Flanagan, I imagine Thor, Sharif, they're all going to go in there, and we'll see ultimately who decides to come back. But I mean, you've got to like the roster. You've got to like Jabari, who, right, Jordan, yesterday got named a Naismith All-American. You like that? Yeah, I still think you like the future of Auburn basketball, despite how this season goes and despite the loss of Justin Powell.
Yeah, sort of piggybacking off of what Justin said, Jamal's play is going to be big, especially if Sharif winds up leaving. I think they will, go out and try to get that traditional point guard, but, you can look at Jamal as somebody that can spell that guy and play point guard for several valuable minutes next season. And I'll kind of plug a story I have that will be in Thursday's paper talking about what is next for Auburn basketball, and kind of talked about the fact that, you could see, I would expect Sharif and Allen and JT to, dip their toe in the NBA waters at the very least and sort of see what their stock is. And it's kind of a total guess and check as far as what the timeline, the time frame is going to look like this year. We still don't know what day the NBA draft is. And sort of with the collective bargaining agreement, they have dates set, as in, you can stay in the draft. You got to declare 60 days before the draft, or you can stay declared until 10 days after the combine, or, you can go back to school. Well, we still don't know those dates because of COVID, and they're still trying to figure out the schedule with that. But I think there's plenty of reason to be optimistic. I think Bruce kind of sounded optimistic after the game when he was asked about next season. So there's going to be a lot of talent. And the thing that excites me the most is just seeing what next year's lineup looks like, because there's going to be talent, like we said, but it's going to be what lineups work, what guys fit best at what spot. So it'll be really interesting to see. And again, as disappointing as this year was, everybody knew it was going to be a rebuilding year. Still had some highlights, pushed Alabama in Sharif's very first game, upset Missouri and Tennessee when they were ranked. Some positives, obviously, some growing pains, but I think plenty of reason to be excited going into next season.
Absolutely. And the fact that Auburn didn't graduate anyone this year, that means whoever doesn't go to the draft or decide to transfer is going to come back to Auburn. So that's always a bright spot. And this is the last time I want to bring this up until we actually know what's going to happen. Does Sharif Cooper stay for one more year, or does he go to the draft? What are y'all's final thoughts before he finally decides?
I'm going to lock in and say that he goes. That's my guess, just because of what he'll wind up seeing as he goes through the process. I'm not 100% convinced that that's what's going to happen. But if, gun to my head, you ask me right now, I say he leaves, he gets that draft stock that says he's, around a lottery pick, coming up to like the 14th pick, and he decides to go.
I think he's gone. But, you never know. There's still a slim chance that maybe they say, hey, you're second round, but if you go back, you could upgrade and go become a lottery pick. So that's the chance. But no, I think he's gone.
I think he's gone, but I also say, it might depend on what his goals are. Like you all said with Justin Powell, if his goal is to be the first guard or point guard drafted, then, and if that's not going to happen this year, maybe he comes back for another year to get that goal. But I guess it'll just be a waiting game until we finally have our answer, hopefully in the next few months or so.
It's a tragic thing because him and Isaac, I both feel like we're kids who just want to play for their school. Like they are school ball players. Like you picture them, they are in backpacks and slide-ons all the time. Like that is, you know what I mean? They are just, they are, I think they really wanted to enjoy the college environment. So kind of a tragic deal that Isaac didn't get to for very long, and Sharif may not either. But yeah, they just seem very at home in the academic setting, the academic student athlete setting. But when you got to go make that money, you go make that money.
Yeah, that's like what Bruce said about Isaac. It was basically like once they got his stock, it's like you have to go. Like you have to do what's best for you, and he probably wanted to stay, but when they tell you could be picked as high as he ultimately was, you go ahead and go pro and make the money.
Well, moving on from basketball, y'all mentioned it's kind of moving to the diamond this season, but it's also moving to the football field. We got spring practice starting on Monday. We just found out, thanks to a podcast with Andy Burcham and Auburn football coach Brian Harsin. So what are y'all's thoughts about this year's breakdown of spring camp that is rapidly approaching?
I'm excited to see what it looks like. I'm really excited to see how much we get to see of it. We haven't really been told what media access is going to look like, not only with the Harsin era, but also because COVID is still very much a thing. But, he kind of explained his layout for spring practice: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturdays for a couple weeks, and basically explaining, the early parts of the week are, they're kind of broken up. That way the coaches can evaluate what they saw, see what needs improving. And then you have Fridays and Saturdays to where the guys kind of get a sense of what the grind's going to be like in fall practice. Cause it's not just a one, 3 times a week. It's a total grind once they get in a fall camp. So I think the setup for the fall practice makes sense. I know that they're building toward A-Day and people are going to be excited about that on April 17th. And I know it's probably going to be here before we know it. So I'm really excited to see what happens between now and then, if we get some chances to talk to Harsin or assistant coaches or some of these players and see what this new era of Auburn football is going to look like.
Yeah, a lot to learn, a lot to see. It's going to be the first time doing all this for everybody. So, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. We still don't have much in the way. I don't think we have an 8 kickoff time set yet. So a lot they're still going to figure out. But, it's always exciting, those report days, at the very beginning. So, it'll kick off pretty soon. It'll be here before you know it.
Just to be sure, I'm going to get to Jordan here at midnight in case they do some kind of madness thing for 8 days. You can never be too sure.
And then Jordan, in your story, you wrote about the breakdown of fall camp or spring camp. I'm sorry, skipping a whole season ahead of us. You mentioned that Brian Harsin said in the podcast that these practices are crucial for his coaching staff's first season for success for the fall. So why do y'all think that spring practice this year is maybe one of the most important spring camps that Brian Harsin will ever have?
I think it's crucial because he doesn't really know this personnel. I mean, he's still been, getting to know the personnel, and not only to know the names and the faces. I mean, that's huge for a new coaching staff, but also trying to figure out the strengths and the weaknesses. I mean, this is the time where maybe a new coaching staff looks at certain guys and says, well, you know what, we think this guy may be better suited at this position. Or, we really like this guy who was a second or third string guy last year with the Malzahn staff. Maybe we give him a chance to start. So really spring practice, especially for a new staff, I mean, it's basically starting over. And we'll probably hear a lot of that from Harsin if we get a chance to talk to him. You always hear when there's sort of a new regime and new coaching staff that basically everybody's coming in, with the slate is clean. Everybody's coming in and has a chance to prove themselves. So I think that's huge. Harsin and his assistants are going to be walking in. They have no ties really to any of these guys other than the recruits that they've signed, with the February signing class and then a couple of the grad transfers they picked up. But they're going to come in and probably just call it like they see it. So I think that'll be big. And that may mean a very different looking Auburn team than what we might have expected and what we might have saw had Gus been back for another year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we could talk for an hour about what we want to see and how we're interested. But I mean, yeah, other than Tank Bigsby's good and he has his running backs coach back, that's it. That's the only known commodity that you got, and that Bo Nix is in year 3. So that's about it. And we'll see, everything else will be new. I mean, talking about everything. So we'll have a much clearer picture here after spring, but for that reason, it's exciting. It's always exciting when it's new.
Well, I definitely want to throw in something, we haven't really talked to Coach Harsin or any of the players in months, but the players are still alive and well. I was picking out some avocados at Kroger the other day and turned around and there was Bo Nix standing there trying to buy his produce, his fruits and veggies. So I guess they got him on a pretty good diet, but the players are still alive and well. So Bo Nix is still at Auburn. Bo Nix, I mean, is definitely taking care of whatever they tell him to dietarily. They're preparing.
I was just going to say, we may get, the Bo Nix, you always hear in spring practice or like with baseball starting up, I'm in the best shape of my life. Maybe we'll get some of that since Bo's eating his fruits and veggies.
He's eating guac, man. That's the secret.
That's true.
Maybe he could teach us a thing or two about how to be the healthiest person we can be for a long life and to be a starting quarterback in college football. But moving on from that, y'all mentioned it is time for sports on the diamond, and nothing better than SEC softball. Auburn softball is quite on a roll. They went 5-0 this past weekend, and they open up SEC play against number 4 Alabama this weekend. So what are you all kind of expecting out of this Auburn team in the lead up to this massive showdown with a top 5 team in the country?
Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what they're made of. But, I would say you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is that a phrase?
That's a thing.
Okay, if you get swept, because they're Alabama and they're good at softball, and they've been good at softball for a long time. So if they get swept, but you got to pick what you can find, see what you can gather from this series. So, what a way to start SEC play. First of all, with the rivalry. Second of all, with a really good team. Conference play, like I said, you can win 10 straight. SEC softball is crazy, man. It's weird. It's, we talk about how dominant SEC football is all the time. In softball, it's even more dominant. I mean, you're looking at the top 20 teams, and most of them are in the SEC. Literally, most of them, more than not, are in the SEC. It's crazy. They've gotten one little sliver of a taste when they split with South Carolina. So they've got some of those freshmen have a little bit of an idea, but this is the real deal now. Now those freshmen, and there's a lot of them, are going to see SEC play for the first time. And again, like, it's a different deal in the SEC just because how good the SEC is. Auburn could be the 20th best team in the country, but still be in the bottom third, bottom fourth of the SEC because the SEC has so many good teams. So we'll see. Don't panic if it doesn't look great. When you're playing number 4 in the country, that'll happen. So, but yeah, I think it's exciting though. I mean, you can finally see. You want to see Maddie Penna start against those girls. That's going to be interesting to see. And fun to watch.
To the point Justin made, I saw a graphic somebody tweeted out. I think it was John Neighbors, who's an Arkansas radio guy. And I saw it, and immediately I thought, so is this the rankings for the SEC, what they expect the SEC to be? No, it's the nation's top 10. There was like 7 or 8 SEC teams. I was like, oh, man. So to Justin's point, I'll throw in another phrase. You're throwing the kid in the deep end, going against Alabama to start things. So, but really, that it's going to be a tough test. Number 4 Alabama, and this is going to be no pushover. So I'll be interested to see how they play. And again, if they struggle, I think that's fair because this is Alabama and they're a really good team. But if they play well, even if they lose, that might show you that this team has some real potential. And they're going to need it because, like we said, Alabama softball and SEC softball in general is no pushover.
And Justin mentioned the freshmen of Auburn, and I saw something really interesting the other day on Twitter from Auburn softball is their freshman pitcher, Shelby Lowe, was named SEC Freshman of the Week for softball. And Auburn said that is the 3rd time in 4 weeks that Auburn has garnered that title. So it looks like Auburn's freshmen are kind of finding their way to make a name for themselves. So what do y'all kind of think the freshmen can expect when they actually, like both of y'all said, jump in the deep end with number 4 Alabama?
It's going to be tough, but obviously the most important thing is the pitcher, and the ball's in their hand every time. So you want to see Maddie Penna, you want to see your new ace against Alabama. So I think that'll be the most telling bit, because batters will be able to adjust. For pitchers, you're going to see this is the level that you're going to be seeing for the rest of the season. So get used to it. It's going to be a grind all the way down the lineup, 1 through 9 for these pitchers. So we'll see. Like I said, throw them in the deep end, and we'll see what happens. That'd be the most interesting thing I'd be most interested in is seeing how the pitchers fare.
And kind of piggybacking off of that, I think my biggest thing would be if they play badly, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's how they respond. I mean, a lot of these freshmen are probably not used to losing. I mean, when you think about, where they're coming from and the talent they've going back to high school, they were probably on mostly winning teams. So, if they do struggle at Alabama, or playing against Alabama, I should say, that might not be the worst thing in the world. It'd be a little bit of adversity early in the year. How do they respond? And are they able to kind of shake that off and play better going down the line? So yeah, it'll be a big test, but I think if Auburn winds up struggling and maybe drops a few games against Alabama, it's not necessarily a bad thing when you look at the big picture.
Absolutely. It'll be definitely a great week of sports on the Plains here. Great weather to be outside. Just want to throw in Auburn baseball will be at home this weekend. We have Auburn softball. They're at home, correct, against Alabama? So I believe that's what they're at home. So you can definitely, this is the weekend. If you want to see some real good softball action, this would probably be your weekend to get out, sit outside in the 80-degree weather and watch some Auburn softball. We're talking about this nice weather, but I kind of want to go back to this Bo Nix buying his fruits and veggies. And I'm going to throw Justin here under the bus. Justin could probably use a little bit of help from Bo Nix trying to navigate the produce section at Kroger.
Wow. I mean, yeah, it's not, I don't know. What was it we were trying to find that time? I could not find them.
Spinach.
Where is that? I see. Okay. Maybe I was looking for the cans, like Popeyes, like Popeye. Like maybe that's where I thought the spinach would be. It would be in a can and I'd squeeze it and it would shoot up in the air. I don't know. I couldn't find it. They don't have labels or anything. It's not like the electronics where you just look like, here's the headphones, here's the phone stuff, here's video games. Easy. This is, what if we rethink this? What if we did colors, like yellow stuff over here, green stuff over here? Because right now it's all mixed together and I can't find anything. I don't know. It's tough. I'd have a hard time finding the avocado in Kroger. I don't know where that is.
I get lost every single time. If Shelby sends me to go get something, there's like 3 or 4 texts. So I'm like, I have no idea where this is. You're going to have to tell me.
See, Painter will just FaceTime me and be like, is this what you want? Is this the right thing? Instead of just sending me pictures and texts, he'll just FaceTime me through Kroger trying to figure out what he needs. The latest thing was I learned how to make healthy pizzas that take 8 minutes to make. And he was trying to find these flatbreads. But they're not flatbreads. They're wraps that are healthy, that are in a square because they're flat. And I can hear him yelling at me now for throwing him under the bus, but I had to explain to him for 5 minutes where to go find them in Walmart's neighborhood market.
So I'm not alone.
I treat grocery trips, you have to tell me exactly what I'm looking for, exactly where to look, and I'll go find it. But I mean, if there's any kind of, well, actually, it might be called this, or it might be, I'm like, you might as well go. It's going to save us both a headache.
I don't know why you're throwing me under the bus. See, I'm not the only one, Sarah. Come on.
There are hundreds of us.
Well, it looks like, you know what? Bo Nix, if football doesn't work out for Bo Nix, he might have a niche market here in Auburn to be a personal grocery shopper for pretty much anybody who doesn't understand how to work the produce section. He could easily start his own business and say, hey, I'll go do it for you if you tell me what you want, or I'll walk you through the grocery store and teach you how to find it yourself.
And the nice thing about that is that picks in that scenario are a good thing. So that's
wow. Good. We're ending on that.
Well, yeah, we are going to end on that. And so what do you guys have coming this week that readers can expect to see both online and in print?
Yeah, excited. We got a few different local coaching changes. Had a chance to talk to Springwood's new football coach. Now Beauregard's got a coaching change, so kind of working on stories about that. Also gonna, planning to have some local recruiting stories. Hoping to have an Auburn football recruiting story. And then before long, we're gonna start previewing stuff for spring practice. So we'll start kind of looking at positions and what we expect to see going into the spring. So we got that on top of softball and baseball, and it'll be a busy time, no doubt.
Yep, baseball, softball, gymnastics is off a week before the SEC championship. One more thing, Tuskegee women's basketball in the NCAA D2 tournament starting on Friday. So that'll be fun to watch. We'll see. They've had a stellar season. You can look it up on our site. It's kind of an interesting deal. They had the conference tournament canceled on them. But after such a great season, they are going to end their season the right way. at the NCAA tournament where they deserve to be after they were 12-1. So we'll see if they can make a little bit more noise, and if not, just end the season the right way at the NCAA tournament. So that's Friday, and then football starting Monday. It's going to be great.
Absolutely. So it'll be crucial for anybody who wants the latest on Auburn sports or any of the sports going on in the area to follow us on Twitter at OA Now and at AU Blog, and also follow Justin and Jordan on Twitter. They will be tweeting out lots of content within, I guess, the next week. If not, they will constantly be tweeting out good content. But we thank y'all for joining us again and your constant support for our podcast. I know we're still getting things rolling and trying to get in a groove. And once we hit a groove, now we got some new stuff coming in, new sports. So trying to find a new groove. And we really appreciate everybody who takes the time to listen or watch us. So until next week, have a great week.